Hi, everyone. My name is Kirk Bachman, and welcome back to The Ultimate Dish. In today's episode, we're speaking with Melissa Trimmer, corporate executive chef at Dawn Foods, ACF certified executive pastry chef, and a 2016 Cutting Edge Award recipient with over 25 years of corporate culinary experience. Melissa has received critical acclaim as a pastry arts leader, having led the pastry departments at two institutions that received the Bib Gourmand rating from the Chicago Michelin Guide's inaugural edition in 2010. Join us today as we chat with Melissa about her journey as an executive pastry chef, her passion as a chef instructor and mentor, and the many ways she supports women in the kitchen. There she is. Good morning, Melissa. Thank you so much for being here today.
Good morning. How are you today? I hope I don't let you down. That was quite the intro.
I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted from the intro. That was really good. I couldn't have written that better myself. No. Super soup. Tell me about the set. I want to reach in and have one of those donuts. Are they vegan by chance?
They're not, well, they're not vegan, but we do have a vegan line.
I know you do.
So, I'm actually sitting at the Dawn Foods Innovation Studio. So if you're unfamiliar with Dawn, we are a baking distributor and manufacturer. And so I'm at their headquarters. I run the innovation studio with the culinary team. And this is our set where we do a lot of the filming. And when my sous chef found out this morning that we were going to be in front of the camera today, he decided to make a bunch of donuts because he was like, why should you go on camera without donuts? And I tend to agree. So
every day's better. Every day's better with donuts, right? I love the colors.
You're not
wrong. Hey, you know what? You just said the word innovation. I've got to capitalize on that for a minute. Cutting Edge Award recipient in 2016. That was through the American Culinary Federation. And if my memory serves me correct, that's about innovation, mentoring, and tutoring others, right?
It is.
Am I embarrassing you there?
A little bit. I'm like, am I turning red? So no, that year, well, at the time, Chef Tom Macrino was the president of ACF, and I love Chef Tom, and he is so supportive of lots of different voices within the ACF. And so he really felt like it was time to amplify some of the voices that maybe felt like they hadn't had as much of a spot at the table. And so he put together the Women's Task Force and asked me to chair it. So we along with a group of like-minded female chefs, spent about 2 years collecting data from the ACF and then reported back to the board with our findings. And really what we ended up finding was not only did female voices need to be amplified, but also people of color, the LGBTQIA community, just lots of folks just needed a little bit more. And we gave our recommendations after the 2-year task force ended, and the board took most of the recommendations. Most of them have been implemented. We've kind of passed the torch on to the diversity committee, and it's been really exciting to see the institutional changes as a result. And I'm just really proud to have been one of those folks raising my hand at the beginning.
One of the first, yes. Yeah. Congratulations. That's super exciting. I want to capitalize here too on the fact that, and I forget this sometimes, right? We worked together for a little while in Chicago. And when I look at your resume and I see your body of work, I forget about Lulu Cafe and Carnival. That some of the times I'm not gonna tell anybody about some of the times at Carnival and Sea House. I mean, these were some of the most popular places in the city, and you came to teach with us right out of that environment. I mean, you were on edge, right? You were the real deal coming out of the industry. What was the motivation at the time to walk away from some of that notoriety and to teach? I know what you're going to say. It's about giving back, but was that what it was back then? I want to say that was what, 2010, 11, 12, right in that kind of.
Yeah. Yep. Right in there. I will tell you what it was. Well, there's two things. One was giving back because I've always loved being a mentor. So you mentioned a lot of the fine dining restaurants that I worked at in Chicago and ran those pastry departments. But one of the things we did is we were always a facility for students to come do their externship. So I was already working with pastry students pretty much on the regular, and just found that I had this passion for it. So that was kind of one side. And we'll get into that a little bit more because even though I'm not teaching currently, well, I do sometimes on the side and I mentor, I think that it's really important to give back. The other part of it was completely selfish, and that was work-life balance, and that I'm a married and I'm a mother, and my eldest at the time was only 6. You know, she's a grown-up teenager now, but at the time she was 6, and I just come home from work. At the time I was, you know, executive pastry chef of a beautiful hotel on Michigan Avenue for a famous celebrity chef. And we did these beautiful mignardises every day. And she had said something to me about cherries. So I made this beautiful cherry pot au feuille with these bonbons, and I brought it home, and I'm like, look, baby, we're going to have a tea party and we're going to do this whole thing. And she sat down and she started crying. And she was like, Mom, I never see you. You're always tired. I don't want you to be a chef anymore. And so I had to sit. You should only hear that once, first of all, from your kid.
Yeah.
So I had to sit once.
One time.
Right. So I had to sit down and I had to reevaluate my life, and I had to decide if fine dining was worth it. And ultimately what I came to was that while I loved fine dining and I love the rush and I love being creative, that I had to find a better balance so that I could be a good chef and a good mom. And then I came to work for you because you understood that.
No, bravo. And that's okay, right? That's okay. Yeah. And God bless your daughter at the time, right? To have that sort of emotion, right? And passion. I want more of mommy, right?
Right. Absolutely. And it's something that I feel like, especially as parents, right, we need to work on, because for so many years, chefs in fine dining in particular, really felt like they had to sacrifice their families for the art and for the craft. And I don't think we do anymore. I think we're you know, dealing with this reckoning in the industry, and I think we're going to come out of it better and stronger as a result.
Oh, well said. So, real quick, to come back to Dawn Foods. So you're in Michigan now. Tell us a little bit about like where you are. You've got a little bit of land for the kids to run, and you're growing some of your own plants and such, right? As I understand it. Yeah.
Yes. So the Dawn Foods Innovation Studio, we have a home office down the way, but my work is in Jackson, Michigan. I actually live in Ann Arbor, and as you know, and maybe some of your listeners know, I've been a city girl my entire life. Yeah. So I am, you know, a city girl through and through. So this is the first time in my life I've lived in the country. We got a big spot in the country with some land off a dirt road, and my kids run and play and enjoy outdoor spaces. So I'll come back to that in a minute. The Dawn Foods Innovation Studio, where I am, is this really kind of neat space where I lead the culinary team, and we get to be really creative every day. We create all the content for the website, all the recipes, all the food photography, all the really fun stuff. But we also partner with R&D, where I get to use the technical side too. So when our team of food scientists, let's say they want to come up with, I don't know, a new chocolate cake mix, my team comes up with a scratch gold standard first. And so we do all this scratch work, and it really could be on agreed upon attributes. And they may come to me and say, Chef, I want a tight crumb. I want it to have butterscotch undertones, and I want it to have a black crumb. And then I need to figure out what that means in scratch world. And we will do many, many tastings. And by the time we get there, then I hand it to the food scientists, and they'll do their, you know, magical voodoo that they do to turn it into a mix. So we really spend a lot of time doing those sorts of things, and then finding custom solutions for the, you know, the customers that I can't name, but I promise you know their brands.
Well, I love that, because what I hear too is another pathway for students, young culinarians, young pastry chefs that are looking to get into the industry. You know, it's okay to find a sort of a space where you can have that work-life balance, which it sounds like you found in Michigan.
I couldn't agree more. And the one thing that I will really stress that is, for me, has been really helpful is that, you know, I heard a chef say once that, you know, that also played music, that once you learn classical music, you can play anything, right? I think it's the same for cooking, right? Like once you have that classical education, and for me, that was, I mean, you know, I went to Johnson Wales, and then I trained in Europe, right? And then I spent some time in really high-end kitchens. Once I had that base, then you can go off and do anything. So I want students to know, like, you know, when I came up, it was fine dining or nothing, right? Like that's all I cared about was like,
sure,
that was it.
Like so fine many dining. Of us, right? Yeah,
we were all there. And so while I love that part, and that's important for your classical base, like you kind of need to start there. There's so many different paths to take that can still offer success and work-life balance and the kinds of things that you want in a life. It doesn't have to just be, well, if you have kids, quit, or go do wedding cakes on the side. I don't accept that. I want more than that. And I have made a path where you can do that.
I love it. I love the story of the musician. I remember a couple of years ago asking my son Joseph Henry's music teacher, who has a master's degree in music, and I remember asking him, or maybe Joseph Henry asked, which instruments can you play? And his response was all of them.
Yeah, right.
I love it. I love it. So let's talk pastry a little bit. So as a pastry chef, but I've always considered you more than just a pastry chef. And we'll get to that in a minute, right? But probably better than anyone that desserts, they're about happiness, they're about chemistry, they're about harmony, right? It all kind of comes together. My father's a pastry chef. But it's also the reason, even for myself, that baking was somewhat intimidating, right? It's like you get one thing wrong and it's over. That's why the mise en place occurs early, right?
Yes.
So with that as a backdrop, what inspired you to become a pastry chef? Such an exact art in many ways, right? As creative as it is, but in an exact science in many ways, right? So where's the inspiration from?
This is such a good question, Chef. All right, so I already prefaced City Girl, right? But and so there's two things you have to know about me, and I know you know this, but the listeners don't. I was raised vegetarian in a hippie household with like no sugar, everything natural, everything super intense. So sugar was like, the forbidden fruit. It was exotic and special and really amazing. And so the only time I ever got my hands on it was in the summers. My sister and I would go off to my aunt and uncle's dairy farm out in Western Pennsylvania, out in Amish country. And as a city kid spending my summers on a farm, I discovered really quickly that I absolutely hated, and I mean hated, being in the fields with my cousins. It was like the stupidest, worst, hot, terrible thing. I was the biggest baby. No, thank you. I don't like bugs. And instead, what ended up happening was my aunt would prepare food every day for all of the farm hands and for the really large extended family. And she had this beautiful kitchen garden next to the house. And so the first day I offered to help in the kitchen instead of going into the fields, it was like, completely selfish. I just didn't want to be in the fields with everyone. And, it was with her that was the first time she had me climb a cherry tree, pick the cherries, make a pie with butter from the milk house. And as these things came together from like truly understanding where it came from, I realized like, this is actually really amazing. And I want to spend the rest of my life doing this. And that's where it came from.
What a beautiful story. And a very consistent story with so many chefs and entrepreneurs that we speak with, right? It's a childhood memory. It's a nana, it's a grandma, it's an oma, that put you in the position to fall in love with it. So you mentioned earlier a little bit about the process at dawn when you're coming up with a new product. How do you, just in general terms, approach that process of creating a new dessert? Because so much is based on history, right? And what we've done in the past. So how do you approach it?
So there's a couple of different ways. And if you're familiar with, the menu bell curve, right? Like fine dining's on this end, and then you go up into ubiquity over here, right? So when you're a fine dining chef, again, we're going to go back to that classical base. Like you should know already what is genoises and how to make it off the top of your head. You should know pastry cream. You should know all these things, how to poach a fruit, whether it's in a sous vide bag or over, a rondo. All those things are givens, right? But when you're in fine dining, you're thinking of the next thing. So if I'm in my fine dining days, for me, the way that I approach a new dessert is whatever's fresh and coming out of the field, because that's what's most delicious right now, right? Like if it's cherry seasoning, I want to work with cherries. If it's the middle of winter, well, let's reach out to California for some citrus, whatever that is. So that's kind of that part of it. And I still love that creative part of it. But today it's a little bit different. Those skills certainly helped me on the way. But when you're in the kind of position I am as a corporate executive chef, we're not at this end of the menu bell curve anymore. We're looking in here because we want to have mass appeal and national launches and sometimes even international launches. So we have to think about it in a little different way. And so today I often rely on the market research team at Dawn, actually. So I look at lots of numbers and graphs
Okay.
and see
Okay.
what's happening in various marketplaces, and then take those things and then combine them with what I already know, which is how to make food delicious and pretty, and then figure out a way that it's going to have a little bit more mass appeal. I find it's actually easier to do a beautiful plated dessert in fine dining because you're only appealing to this many people that are going to think it's
Yeah,
awesome
sure.
anyway. I found it's more difficult to have those larger launches, but the good part about those larger launches is that they hit such a wider audience. As you know, I spent so many years in fine dining, and I care about where food comes from and environmentalism and everything else. And it's really sexy to be one of those chefs, right? Like you get press and it's all over the place. When just before I came to Dawn, and I was with a different company, when I had one of the big international launches, we were able to get them to commit to reducing their packaging by 15%. That one project did more for the environment than probably the rest of my career combined. So it wasn't sexy and I wasn't on a menu, but it had just so much more impact that it felt really good.
And the right thing to do. It feels very strategic. I like that a lot. So do you believe from a boy, it's 2021, almost 2022, social media has such a big impact today, right? So a lot of people are seeing things on Instagram and TikTok and Twitter and all of that before they even come into your restaurant. Is that more pressure on chefs in general?
You know, I guess with anything in cooking, you could call it more pressure, but I think it's exciting because
Okay.
listen, it used to be, that the big cities were like the hubbubs of everything, right? And then like if you wanted to have a fabulous dinner, you had to go there. This is the first time in history where social media is bringing those trends to the masses first. And so you could be in one of those secondary markets and still do something really cutting edge and really exciting and have the audience for it. So I think it's really actually allowing chefs in some of those smaller markets outside of like, New York, Chicago, Seattle, San Francisco, it's allowing them to have a level of creativity that they couldn't have sold before. I think it's awesome.
No,
Like
I love
actually.
that. That's a great response. So 25 years, hard to believe, right? 25 years experience. And so there's probably not, and it sounds like you're learning every day, but it's probably not a lot, at least foundationally, that you're not aware of, right?
Sure,
Um,
sure.
and you've touched on this a little bit, but for our listening audience, what is your regimen in terms of how do you stay on top of something that's going to last versus just a trend?
Right.
And for Dawn, how do you decide which way to go, right? Because there's a
Yeah.
lot of trends out there, right? Do you get on that bandwagon, or do you just let
I
it
mean,
go?
yes and no. I will simply say that on this side of it, we have a lot of market research folks where that's their whole job is to mine through the data, and
Absolutely. Yeah.
which is really really exciting. But for me, a lot of it is my contacts, right? I know that we love talking about how chefs all network, and there's probably 1.5 degrees of separation between professional cooks. So so there's definitely that. There's definitely eating out, right? And a lot of it's social media now. It's like, who are you following in your feed? Who is interesting? And what has staying power? There are some trends that are really fun for social media, but maybe aren't practical in, like
Sure.
cloud bread. It's really cool. My kids want to make it. Even if I was still in fine dining, would I serve it? Probably not. But that doesn't make it any less neat or impactful. So I think part of it's just sifting through the noise and finding what works. And what's really important, I feel like, or what I've maybe discovered as my career has gone on, is that what works for one concept doesn't work for another, and that's okay. Like that's actually really interesting and cool. So let's find the concepts that work for
Yeah,
you.
yeah. So some thought definitely goes into it. Are there any characteristics of a trend that you'll stay away from? Like want nothing to do with that, right? Cornflakes on ice
I
cream, right?
Yeah, I hate the F word, which is fusion.
Okay, okay, okay. That's fair.
um, not that it can't be done well. Like it can. There are some folks that execute it really well. I hate when you say like da 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 fusion, and I'm like, what does that mean? Really? Like, let's say, as cooks in the United States, isn't fusion every day for us? Like, why do we have to call that out? Why can't I just say I want to use furikake and also with this French technique, and that's just what I'm doing because I work here, or I live here, or this is what's exciting to me today. So I just feel like sometimes when people use the word fusion, it's trying too hard And it's almost like trying to be a gimmick rather than really delicious food. Like, let's
No,
just make
well
really
said.
delicious
Yeah,
food.
don't put me in that box, right? Yeah, just let me cook and hopefully you enjoy it. Very, very cool. Have there been or is there one particular pivotal moment in this journey, this 25-year journey? Well, even take it further back to being in the cherry fields, right? Is there that one moment that kind of defines who Melissa is today as a cook?
Oh my, there's many, but I have to be honest. I think the one that I'm maybe most proud of is the day I got my CEPC certifications.
Oh,
Um,
bless you. Yeah, yeah.
that was
That's
a
cool.
long
Proud
road.
moment. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It was. And for those of you that don't know, CEPC is Certified Executive Pastry Chef through the American Culinary Federation. It's a very, very intense cooking exams and written exams after you've done lots of things to qualify for it. And at the time, chef, the day that I went in and took my practical exams, which is the cooking portion, I was the only one that passed that day, and I was the last one that went through evaluation. And I mean, I'm watching guys come out crying, and I was like, oh, this is,
Oh
and I
yeah.
passed. It was amazing and terrible, and all of those things. But certification in my life has really mattered. It's really kind of projected my career to the next level, which is why after going through that and being terrified of the evaluators and all the other things, it's why I became a certification evaluator. So now I'm one of those people, but I try not to be terrifying.
It comes back to the mentoring piece, right? By the way, as I think Frank Volkomer works for us, right? Certified master
Yes,
pastry chef, one of only a few. And
yes.
he knew that we were chatting this morning and he wanted to make sure I said hello. Even though you guys haven't met, he's a follower. He loves your stuff on social media. So, I mean,
Yep.
it's what a small world it's become, right?
It
I love
really
it.
is. It really is. And I think he came to you from my alma mater too.
He
So
did. He did.
yeah.
He did. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. He's been a delight. So I'll be the first to admit that many pastry chefs, right? Cliche, can throw down in the savory kitchen.
Can
Um,
they?
yeah. I mean, this is a great conversation, right? My dad always challenged me, right? It's like his sauerbraten better than my sauerbraten, right? He's a
Right,
pastry chef.
right.
But do you think that the term pastry is unnecessary? I mean, do you think we're all just chefs, or you're all just chefs, or do you like the nomenclature?
Boy, that's a tough one. So here's what I will say. When my team calls me in the kitchen, they don't say, "Hey, pastry chef Trimmer."
Oh, good point. Yeah, yeah,
They're like, "You
yeah.
just chef."
You're the
But I
chef.
do,
Yeah.
yeah, right, exactly. Chef or yeah, mostly just
Pastries are
chef.
pastries end up being your specialty, but doesn't mean that you don't know how to make a stock and you don't know how to saute. Of course
I
not,
mean,
right?
this is a softball because I started out on Savory line.
I do, I do, I do. And
So
that's
I
what
mean,
was so amazing to me when you came to work for us in Chicago, is that, you turned some heads, right? It's, I don't even know how long it took for us to make you a lead instructor and a department chair or whatever you were. I
not
mean,
long.
it went pretty quickly, right?
It
so,
did.
and you get there because, respect, experience and such. So yeah, I think we're on the same page there. You bring up a really good point. In the kitchen, you're the chef, right? At
Right,
the end,
right. Yeah, but I feel like, okay, so yes, you're the chef in the kitchen, but like also there's something to be said for each side. So to be fair to what you were saying earlier, it is fairly unusual for somebody to flip back and forth. I prefer being on the pastry side. I started on the savory side. I learned to break down a bird and flip a saute pan before I ever learned to roll a croissant. I like doing croissants. um, and some of the places I worked, they knew that, and some they didn't. But one thing that I really encourage my pastry students to always think about is versatility, because as soon as times get tough in a kitchen, even in fine dining, they're going to look at a place to trim the fat. And so if you become as versatile as possible, step on and work pasta, get on grill, learn how to temp meat, touch it and temp it. In addition to being able to temper chocolate and, roll a beautiful laminated dough, you'll find that your pastry department will not get cut because you've made yourself, indispensable. They can't move without you. And so I think that that's really important. Chef, I don't know if you remember, I think it was one of the first classes that I taught for you at Le Cordon Bleu. was a plated dessert class, and I made all the students stand at the stove and learn how to flip a saute pan, and they thought I was nuts. And I was like, listen, who's going to tell you you're not going to have a hot pickup on plated desserts? Flip the pan. And the pastry chef instructors came in and they were all upset with me. And I was like, no. We're flipping pans today. That's what we're doing.
I love it.
So,
I love it. Spoken like a leader. That sort of foresight for students' careers going forward is super, super important, because trimming the fat is inevitably something that occurs. It just does.
right.
Could be seasonal, could be pandemic related. It does happen. So you've been doing, the corporate chef thing for a while as well, which is a whole different world, right? Lots of
Yes.
responsibility. Tell us a little bit about a day in the life, right? Today looks really good, right? Bunch of donuts, beautiful space, right? Do a little podcast. But there's a lot of responsibility for a big company like that. Walk us through
There
that.
is. Yeah, no, there is. I think that, one of the biggest things that came from working in those smaller places is not just the cooking side, right? Like cooking's the easy part. So getting that classical cooking education, number one, right? The second part of that is the business acumen. And so you can be the most talented pastry chef ever, right? And if you can't run a good shop, you're still going to go under. And the reverse is true. You can be a really mediocre pastry chef, but be really good at business and be really successful. And so, part of the corporate side is being able to see those things and to have the foresight and to think about strategic long-term planning. Since I've been a corporate chef for probably almost 10 years now, and I've done everything from coordinate international product launches. So you need to look at like Tokyo and Paris and New York and London all at the same time, and how are we going to get these things off the ground, to something as simple as, this is this really large customer, they're a national customer, they want to create fill in the blank, and they have a microwave. Go. So it really encompasses being really flexible and understanding many different parts of it. But the business acumen is really the top part of it. And part of it is understanding not just P&L statements and strategic planning, but the other part of it is how you present yourself. So as you know, like you probably can't tell because my chef coat's covering my shoulders, but I'm fairly heavily tattooed, right? I came out of fine dining. I listened to crazy rock and roll and hip hop. Like, so that's all me too. And I probably walk into these meetings with, high top sneakers on and a suit. But at the same time, I can get in front of really anybody and present myself in a professional manner. And so that's really, really important. And it's one of the things that I try to talk to the students about when they're posting on discussion forums or having conversations. Like, listen, guys, what you do in practice, you will do in performance. Write in complete sentences, speak in a way that people will receive your message, and stand up straight, look in the camera, smile a lot. That'll take you a long way. It really will.
The soft skills are important, and I appreciate you saying that, particularly the piece about being yourself. At Escoffier, it's very important that students understand the tradition of working in a kitchen. That's one thing, but we highly encourage students to be themselves, right, and to really focus on that. So no, I really appreciate that. So as we're talking about this environment, and this is the creative side, you're probably tasked with, what's next, what innovation is coming from Chef Melissa next. Where do you find your inspiration for whatever it is, a new take on a traditional flavor or something just like completely outside of the box, no pun intended, but where is the inspiration? Does it come from the farm now? Does it come from your history? Does it come from your children? Where does that inspiration come from?
Oh my gosh, Chef. Yes. Why do I have to pick one?
All of the above. All of the above is okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All of the above.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with what the ask is and what the market is now, right? Like, again, because it just depends on who I'm targeting. So a lot of that goes back to that business acumen and marketing, right? So like, if I am trying to target millennials, I may look at some market data now and say, spicy foods are interesting right now for them. We want to look at world flavors and textures and how can I combine these into whatever medium makes sense. So a lot of it's really just collecting data and filtering it in a way that makes sense, which again doesn't sound exciting or sexy, but it totally is. Like it is. And then the other part of it, which I keep going back to, is having that classical base and understanding ingredient functionality. Because one of the mistakes that I see so often with folks early on in their career is they want to be, really creative, and they're like, I want to use Chinese 5-spice and pink peppercorns and rose petals and the same thing. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Those are all really cool things. Pick one. Pick one savory element per dessert. Maybe you can get away with 2 if they really make sense together, like, I don't know, shiso and miso or something like that. But beyond that, it's really understanding how to create these things in a way that is pleasing on the palate. And that's something that, gosh, that takes years to develop, and understanding how those things work and how those textures play together.
Yeah, I was just going to say, sometimes after, a quarter century of experience, does it sometimes just come from the gut? Like, hey, I just feel like that's not going to work, or I just feel like that needs to work, right?
And I have to tell you, we are so far in front of things like here. So I am already working on next holiday season's content. I was literally working on that earlier today.
Mise en place.
Yeah. A year ahead of time, because we'll shoot it, we'll create the recipes and stuff, and we will shoot it. I'll shoot it in a couple of weeks. So when I think about those sorts of trends, not only do I have to look at today, I'm often looking a year in advance. Is this going to stay till next year? And the thing is that there will be some things that will and some that won't. Like cloud bread, even if it has, nobody's going to be trying it at home, but I bet you hot chocolate bombs are still around.
Makes total sense. So lots of experience in the industry, lots of experience as an instructor, formal education. What are some of the most important things, or even just the most important thing, that you want your students or those you are mentoring to walk away with from you? This is specifically, 5 years from now, they're going to say, Chef Melissa taught me this, or I do this because of Chef Melissa.
Right. I would love to say there's all these skills, but at the end of the day, the most important one, I think, is knowing their own worth and being able to advocate for themselves. It took me a really long time to learn that as even before I was an executive pastry chef, right, as a young cook and coming up through, very European, very male-dominated kitchens. And good Lord, when I studied over there, I was not only the only American, I was a girl on top of it. And, back then, they would tell you the highest you could rise was sous chef. That was it. That was all you could hope for. And when you hear that kind of a thing, you can go 2 places with it. You could be really upset and let it kind of kill your spirit and be all done and move on to something else. Or you can let it light a fire in your belly and be like, is that right?
I'll show them.
Well, let me show you this. And so if students or anyone I've mentored takes anything from me, it's knowing their own worth and knowing that it takes time to get there. You've got to build your skill set. Failing sometimes is okay. Sometimes the best lessons we learn are from failure, but know who you are and know your worth, because chances are you have experiences and opinions and skill sets that are really valuable.
Are things changing? Let's go US, let's go Europe for women chefs.
I mean, yes.
Case in point.
Yeah, right. Like, here I am. Hi. We still have some places to go, but when I look at where we were when I started and where we are today, it's very different, right? Like, the first time I ever worked with another woman in the kitchen, I was more than 10 years into my career, right? So that wouldn't happen anymore. So now we're seeing, like, with culinary school numbers, we're seeing pretty equal amounts of students, right? It's with probably skews more women in pastry, but the numbers overall are pretty similar. If we look at hospitality as a whole, right, it's pretty evenly split. We do need to work on leadership. Got to work on that. and the best way to work on leadership, we do. It's just reality. But the best way to work on leadership is to have as much representation as we can. Again, that's why I went back to, that's why I became a certification evaluator, so that when somebody else is going through that exam, I didn't see any female certification evaluators, let alone anyone of color. So it's important to have those folks that lift down their hand and then pull the next one up. I have to say that I recently started mentoring, I don't work for Kellogg's, but Kellogg's it's called a Kellogg's Chef in Residency program.
Okay.
And what they've done is they've created this fellowship. It's called a Culinary Fellowship for young chefs of color that are from in areas that might be a little tougher. And they've partnered them with mostly corporate chefs to kind of say, hey, you know what? You don't have to slave away behind the stove for the rest of your career. Let's get you some soft skills. Let's get you in a place where you're going to be the next leader. And it's those sorts of things that are really, really close to my heart and that I try to spend a lot of time with.
I appreciate that. That the mentorship is so important. Giving back, right?
Yes.
So working in a kitchen, professional kitchen, being a corporate chef, being a mom, it's all demanding, right? And I know this is a very, emotional piece for you. How do you, great words of advice here, so choose them carefully. how do you how do you pick that, or how do you create, I think is a better word, work life balance so that you can give as much as you need to give to your family while also giving everything you possibly can for your career?
Oh, what a good question, Chef. This took me some time to learn too. So I'm going to share some personal stuff with your folks. So you guys heard me say earlier, we talked about my eldest child. My younger child, who's also equally amazing, is autistic, and so I'm a special needs mom also. And they now they call it autism spectrum disorder, which really irritates me because there's nothing wrong with him. It's not a disorder, right? It's just who he is. And where he falls on the spectrum is what was, formerly called Asperger's. We don't use that anymore, but it sometimes helps people give an idea of where my son is. And so then it becomes almost even more important to figure out, how am I going to manage this life, right? Because fine dining takes so much out of you. And I'm glad I had that base, but I realized I couldn't stay in it forever and be a good mom and a good wife, and especially as my son's needs have progressed through the years. It's actually why I stopped traveling for work. I used to be on an international team and go to all these places, and it was awesome. And it's why I took the job at Dawn, actually. Dawn's a family-run company, and so they understand family values and that you need to have that work-life balance. But there's a few things that I've tried through the years that have worked really well for me. The last fine dining spot I was at, actually, I asked for a written contract as the executive pastry chef. And so again, this goes back to knowing your worth, right? If you would like me here, let's write a contract. And within that contract, we wrote my maximum number of hours per week. And, as a young cook, I would have been terrified to walk in and negotiate like that. And I got to the point where I was like, no, I've got 2 kids at home. This is important for me. If you want me, then this is what I need from you. And surprise, surprise, they did it, right? They agreed. They were like, they probably thought I was nuts, but they were like, well, okay. And so we wrote it in. And at the time,
It was important to you. It was important to you. So yeah.
So that's one tactic that has worked really well. And the other thing within knowing your worth is knowing if something isn't a good fit. Sometimes when people interview us, we just try for the job, but ultimately we're interviewing them too. And so it's important to find a company that shares your values. I found I've done things that with my children's schools, a lot of times they're not very good about getting dates out, right? You find out the week before. But I'll set up an appointment with them at the beginning of the school year and sit down and spread a calendar out and say, hey, listen, when I was traveling for work, I was traveling. Now my schedule books out literally months in advance. My schedule books out months in advance. So I'm going to need you to give me a few solid dates so I can make sure to show up on the school on these days. And they'll say, we don't have any. And I'm like, great, write them for me. It doesn't matter to me, but we're going to sit down together. We're going to write them so that I make sure I am present and I am there. And so those types of lessons that, I don't know if I would have stood up for myself early in my career, but learning how to do that has made not just my family happier, but it's made me happier. And then when I'm at work, it allows me to focus. I feel better about it. I don't feel like I'm being taken advantage of. So then I'm ready to give that 110%. And the other side of that is when you know your worth and you're asking for these things, when you're at work, then you need to overachieve. That's just the other part of it. Like you have to get in there and you have to give that 110% so that they know you're worth it.
Sure. Thank you for sharing that really beautiful story. Such good advice for so many who still kind of struggle with work-life balance, right? So it feels like you took charge of your life. And I love that. I'm so proud of you. Hey, we're getting a little close to the end here, but before I let you go, you've been delightful. This has been amazing. I love how you address everyone in the crowd. Is so cool. The name of the podcast is The Ultimate Dish. So we're asking you, Chef Melissa, what is the ultimate dish?
Chef, I was thinking about this for some time and I have two answers for you, but they both are tied together. So I'm going to tie them together for you. Grown up, Melissa, grown up Melissa's ultimate dish is a really beautiful cheese and charcuterie board with a fresh baguette on it and some beautiful preserves and lots of fresh cheeses. And I'm going to bring it back to the beginning, to the farm, right? Again, going back to that kid that was, raised by hippies, never had sugar. When I would go out to the farm, I thought my aunt made the best sugar cereal because it was like exotic. Remember, couldn't have it. The best Lucky Charms in the world. And I never had Lucky Charms so good. And I couldn't understand why they were so delicious. And as an adult, I realized because they were putting fresh, unpasteurized milk directly from the cow onto that cereal. And that's the reason I've never had another bowl of Lucky Charms. It's as good as it was there. And so it was that fresh, beautiful dairy that probably one of my cousins had collected that made it so good. And so I would say that just like craftsmanship and care, grown up Melissa likes a charcuterie board, but it came from those early bowls of Lucky Charms with, farm fresh milk.
I am going to venture to guess that I haven't heard and I never will hear a more amazing story than that. And we should call the Lucky Charms people because they're going to want to hear this story. Right. Absolutely. Love it. Love it. Chef, thank you so much for spending time with us. I think there's more to talk about, so I'm going to have you come back.
I'd love to. Next time I'll send you some of those donuts.
Yeah, and we could, and send some vegan ones too, because I do remember your being vegan, plant-based for a long time. And, I'm proud to say I'm kind of 80-20 there now, not 100%. Right. But yes, we're getting there. Right. As we get a little older, we want to feel good and it's the right thing to do. But thanks again for being with us today. Okay.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to the Ultimate Dish Podcast, brought to you by Auguste Escoffier School of Culinary Arts. Visit escoffier.edu/podcast. where you'll find any materials mentioned during the podcast, including notes, links, and other resources. You can also browse other episodes and subscribe.